Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Something Something podcast. My name is Eric Kasloff, and with me, as always, is Larry Sands. How's it going, Larry?
I'm superb. I'm doing great, Eric. So I wanted to kick off this show. Recently, I was watching Fight Club, rewatching,
Stop.
and
Stop.
and what?
You're breaking the first rule.
Never mind. Actually, so I was watching but and I wanted to talk to you about this because I'm watching it and
Right there.
maybe yeah, yeah. And maybe it's just me, but do you think that movies are dated
No,
the way that they're made?
no. I think certain movies are perfect time capsules of the
Yeah.
time. Like the Scream movies are the perfect time capsule of the 90s. Empire Records shows like one of my all-time favorite movies, shows exactly what it is to be a teenager or 20 something in the late 90s.
Yeah, yeah. Now let me ask you this, because it I began to think about it, and I mean, what about music?
No, again, art when it's done right
Yeah.
is like a time capsule
Mhm.
of the era that it came from, and you could look back on it and remember those times.
I like that. I like that because no joke, I like watching it. It took me back to when did it come out? In the 90s, right?
Yeah, mid
Late
90s,
90s?
mid to late 90s.
And and I had this was my acting phase, right? I was
Oh,
just thinking about getting into acting, and obviously Brad Pitt, right, is like one of the biggest guys at that point,
yeah.
right? And and I look at it now and I think to myself, I'm like, the way that it's shot and the way that it looks, it's absolutely amazing. And it holds up very well.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Very well. And I was thinking to myself about things that seem dated, or is it that we just get a little bit more older and look back on those times as dated?
I think if you're looking back at something as dated, you're looking at it wrong.
Okay. Why?
Because again, art is meant to not, I'm not, again, I don't do the whole high art thing. Again,
Right,
I
right.
make teen horror movies for teenagers. I like the same bands I did when I was 15,
Yes.
but it's when something is done right, it makes you remember those times. Now, people who say it's dated don't understand those times, but you take a kid who, again, who was really into One Direction when they were big.
Yep.
When they listen to One Direction, when they have kids, they're going to look back at it as still this vibrant, fresh thing, but their kids are going to look at it as this dated thing because they
Right.
don't connect to it.
Right.
But then there are some people who are more open minded and are able to connect to art from the past.
Nice. Nice. I like that
Now,
because
Larry, I
yeah.
have a way to connect our guests to what you were talking about.
Oh, excellent.
The movie that we can't talk about
Hmm.
involves men brutally beating each other with their fist into the ground. Now,
Yes.
again, I'm a huge MMA fan. I
Yes.
am a very passionate professional wrestling fan. And
Yes.
one huge problem in both sports, this from what I know wrestling a bit more from the wrestling world, the whole thing of unprotected chair shots. Now that when you see someone get hit by a
That's
steel chair
real.
in wrestling,
That's real, right?
well, they put their hands up so their hand takes a lot of the
Sometimes
bulk.
they don't though.
That's what I was getting to. Like when
Yeah.
most people think about Dwayne Johnson, they think the Fast and the Furious. I think about the guy who handcuffed Mick Foley at a match and then hit him 15 times in the head with a steel chair
Oh my
while
God.
his family watched. Now, Mick Foley's brain is destroyed because of that. Chris Benoit's brain was
Yeah.
destroyed, and he did the most horrific thing
Yes,
ever
because of that.
because of that. And it is a serious issue, not just that, but amongst high school athletes
Yes.
are affecting this. Baseball, Lou Gehrig's disease started from what people say, all the hits people would take in the head, the whole thing like that. So our guest has a lot to say about that. So tell us about our guest, Larry.
Yes, our guest for this episode is Dr. David W. Smith, MD, better known to us as Dr. Dave. Hi, Dr. Dave. How are you?
Hey, greetings, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Let's talk about, because you have a new book, right? That really does your book answer questions or pose more questions? And I should say, let's actually get the name of the book out, which is When Heads Come Together, Discovering Nature's Secrets of Preventing Traumatic Brain Injury. So what is it about your book, and will we ever know? And I was looking at your website, and you have an amazing trailer that speaks to your book. And I know I'm kind of going all around, but it's like Eric said, this is like probably one of the most important things in sports. And really, you can just fall. Is that right? And get a traumatic brain injury?
Well, that's correct. There was actually the largest researcher for traumatic brain injury to date is a guy named Daniel Spate. He's out of Arizona. And I went to one of his podcasts recently, and he started out the entire talk by saying that because traumatic brain injury tends to affect a younger population that tends to not die of their affliction, it causes more human pain, suffering, and cost than all cancer, all heart attacks, and all strokes.
Wow.
And I was recently at the Army Research Lab, which we can get into if you'd like.
Yes,
And
please.
after I was done presenting to them on an unrelated topic, trying to help our soldiers not bleed out on the battlefield, the project coordinator came up, kind of put his arm around me, or on my shoulder anyway, and said, "Damn, clever stuff, Doc." He said, "We wish that clever people would solve traumatic brain injury, $100 billion in 100 years, and we've hardly moved the needle." Well, then somebody in the audience says, "I think if somebody could just figure out how a woodpecker can smack its head into a tree 80 million times and fly away unharmed, wouldn't we have this whole thing figured out?" And lo and behold, about 6 months later, I actually did figure that out. It evolved into creating something called the Q collar. Most of your audience, or many of them, may have seen these on the NFL players this season.
Yeah.
So in our very first year of launching it here in the United States, we had 40 NFL players, 8 in the playoffs, 1 in the Super Bowl, that already have used it. We are the first and only medical device that the FDA is ever allowed to make the claim that we block traumatic brain injury. And believe it or not, in our animal studies, we blocked 83% of it, even on IED levels of force. So we've got something really cool here to talk about.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You are obviously very passionate about this. And I guess that begs the question is, how did all this come about? How did you start, and why did you start your research on traumatic brain?
Okay. Well, strangely enough, believe it or not, I started in the academic world as a chemist, which would probably put all of you to sleep if I start talking much more about that. But it took a chemist's brain that actually has a very strong physics background. And then I went into medicine and became an internal medicine specialist. That's sort of the detective of the medical world. That was at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, a pretty big juggernaut of academia as well as physics and engineering. And when I ultimately came out, I ended up acquiring the assets to make advanced wound dressings from the Pfizer development company, and ultimately started making smart dressings. And that's how I ended up at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. I was there showing the military how we might be able to save some of our soldiers from bleeding out. I was basically consulted by a company called Materials Modification Inc., and they have gone forth with these concepts, and that dressing is available to our soldiers to this day. Wow. But it was the idea that was put into my head that this woodpecker could actually solve this problem. That really got me stoked, because as a medical internist, I get 30 people coming to me every day. I don't know if I have an answer for them. I don't even know if there is an answer for them. But nature has really figured this whole thing out. Wow. Not only can woodpeckers smack their heads at 1,200 Gs when you and I get usually a traumatic brain injury at 100 Gs, less than a tenth of that. But head ramming sheep, they smack their heads at 500 Gs. Giraffes smack their heads at 500 Gs. Well, how do these animals do it if you and I can't do it? And that's what kind of got me stoked. And I started immersing myself into all the literature, and I learned everything I could about all these animals and creatures. And then luckily, I've got a formal background in physics and in math and in chemistry. And I threw that on top of all the physiological anatomy. And I started looking at these creatures, and it was so obvious to me that it was almost embarrassing. So believe it or not, on a woodpecker, they have a tongue that starts at the top of their beak and goes up between their scalp and their bones, and it goes back around and around to their jugular veins, and then attaches to the jugulars, and then comes forward, reattaches, and goes in and out with every blow into that tree. I mean, are you serious? How could this creature have evolved to have this tongue? And then it gets better. I really struggled because they're endangered species. I wasn't allowed to buy one. I couldn't dissect one. I couldn't even buy a dead carcass of one. And so I suddenly, thank God, remembered, well, wait a minute, omohyoid apparatus is what this tongue is called. Wait a minute, we have omohyoids in our necks. And are you ready for this? No one knew why they're there. No one knew why every mammal on the planet Earth has these two sets of muscles. And it turns out, through our research starting around 2007 or so, turns out every time you yawn, you block off your jugulars in 4 places. And the reason that you do is it diverts blood back into the cranial space, and about an Easter egg full of extra blood is retained in your cranial space. And what that is bubble wrap. It's just like an airbag. It prevents the brain from rattling around inside the confines of your skull. And it turns out that we started calling that slosh theory, and it hit. And brain slosh, as everybody talks about this now, it's not the helmet that can protect against this. So, we've had thousands of advances in helmets, and they do exactly what they're supposed to do. They prevent you from having a skull fracture. They prevent your eye from getting gouged out, but they can't prevent your brain from banging around inside your skull. But yawning does, because that's what nature had evolved to do that. And then we got clever and figured out a way to give you that physiology continuously on the football field and on the battlefield. I don't think your coach is going to let you yawn all afternoon while you're out there playing football. And I don't think the general or corporal is going to allow you to do that on the battlefield. Yeah. But when we put this device on that we created, we give that physiology to you, and it lasts 8 hours. The FDA says we can do it for 4, just to give us a little fluff. And then here's the part you're going to love. After becoming this classification of the first and only, we just recently partnered with the Army. We actually block IED levels of force from entering the brains of our soldiers. We blew up a bank here in Cincinnati, Ohio, with 30 SWAT officers. Half of them had Q collars on, half did not. We did tensor MRIs, very sophisticated imaging study before the day started. Then after the day, we were able to demonstrate that all the damaging effects of those IED levels of forces went right through the soldiers, were not absorbed.
You got to be kidding.
Wow.
Isn't it fun stuff? I just absolutely love this. I mean, it all started, I had to kind of figure out how to navigate through it. I was a practicing physician when I started coming up with these ideas, and I literally gave up the medicine practice to be able to go after this dream. I get to hopefully help somebody one person at a time in my medical practice,
Yeah.
but we plan on helping millions of
Right.
people with this device,
Yeah.
and we're well on our way.
Wow.
Wow, this is such groundbreaking,
Yeah.
inspiring stuff. Because what you said about the helmets is so true. They're doing their job, but it's like I always say when it comes to concussions, a helmet is like putting a Band-Aid on cancer. It's not
Right.
going to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and quite literally, there is $100 billion worth of research that's gone into this, and they have not been able to change much. When I started working with Julian Bales, that might ring a bell to you. There was a movie back in 2015.
The Will
That was a
Smith
movie.
movie, right?
Will
Concussion?
S- Will Smith and
Uh,
Alec Baldwin played my colleague Julian Bales.
mm,
Alec Baldwin played Julian. Will Smith played Bennett Amalu, and Bennett Amalu was the brilliant pathologist that came up with chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
mm.
So I was sitting there watching Julian Bales testify to Congress on concussions, and I turned to the guy next to me and I said, I think Bales needs to meet me. And I was just kidding,
Yeah.
you know. Well, I woke up after a good night's sleep and I went, well, by God, I think he actually really does need to meet me.
Mm.
And I set out trying to get through the myriad of people to try to get to the chief of neurosurgery at West Virginia University at the time, with the guy that learned how woodpeckers can, knock their heads into trees. I almost got hung up on. But ultimately, he and myself in West Virginia decided that if we could block by way of his study techniques more than 2 to 3% of traumatic brain injury, that they would open the doors, give us seed money, start working on our patents with us. Well, we blocked 83% of brain injury. I mean, it's just unheard of.
Wow. Here's a crazy question. Were you driven? Did you feel driven to find the answer? Because it would seem this is so weird, but it somehow did you feel compelled to continue to follow this investigation? And how hard was it? And how frustrating was it?
It was pretty bad, to be honest with you. I had many pitfalls, and if you talk to other entrepreneurs, you'll find that one thing that you have to do as an entrepreneur is you have to learn how to fail, and you need to be able to get up, and you need to persevere. You need to be, that carrying of the banner for your ideas and concepts going forward. We actually applied to a government DoD program called JIDO, which stands for Joint Improvised Explosive Device Defeat Organization. They had $9 billion of funding when we started, and we got through all these stages. Took me a year and a half to get to stage 5 when they defunded the entire organization. At stage 6, we start getting checks. That was a year and a half of my life. So I had to kind of pivot. I ended up meeting up with a company that was making at the time flavored mouth guards. Their name is Mogo, and they did a wonderful job of making these, and they sold them through every different facet you can believe, including Nike and Under Armour started selling their brand. And they approached Dr. Julian Bales, who already knew of my work and the research that he and I had started. And they told Dr. Bales, hey, it's our understanding that mouth guards might actually prevent against traumatic brain injury. Would you mind representing us? Will you be an influencer? He goes, well, I've kind of read those studies. I don't really buy into the fact that mouth guards can block brain injury. He said, besides, I've actually found this bird brain doctor that actually may have already figured out exactly what is causing traumatic brain injury. And believe it or not, they turned around and asked if they could be introduced to me. And they ended up selling all their assets in the Mogo mouthguard company in order to take this technology forward. And unfortunately, it's cost $19 million to get to this stage. We have 25 published vetted articles with research partners, including Cincinnati Children's, Harvard, Mayo Clinic, University of Toronto. These are massive organizations. And we were not only able to convince these researchers to be a part of this, but the studies just started coming back stunning. They all showed this unbelievable benefit and no side effects. We studied over 1 million head impacts under unbelievable auspices, and we didn't have a single unusual occurrence. Not one.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. So
That-
we've been
wow.
we've been endorsed by the Premier Lacrosse League. We've been endorsed by the Downhill Bobsled and Skeleton International Organization. Apparently, when these crazy people go down a side of a mountain in these ice channels and they bang their heads into the
Right,
sides of these ice
yeah.
channels 20, 30, 40 times. By the time they get to the bottom, they're confused oftentimes. They hear ringing
Yeah.
in their ears and they're tired and fit. Well, they put the Q collar on, nothing. They have no more hangover, as they call it.
Wow.
What?
So I was
That's
told by the
amazing.
company that we sold out the entire bobsled national team within 2 days. They just one
Wow.
after another started using the Q collar. We were talking earlier about MMA fighters. I have
Yeah.
a colleague of mine that's an MMA fighter, and his mentor is a 6th-degree black belt in one of the arts. I don't remember which one it was. I asked them, I gave them each prototype experimental Q collars, and I said, have at it, tell me what you think. They proceeded to put the collar on and put their hand, one of them would put their hands behind their back, and the other one would pummel the other guy. And when they were done, the 6th-degree black belt takes his collar off and starts to hand it to him. And he says, Dr. Dave, we can't use this. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, we're a blood sport. We can't knock each other out. No one will come to watch us.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
started reaching to grab it and he pulls it back. He goes, I'm just kidding. 95% of the time we spar. I'm not giving you back your
Yeah,
prototype.
that's
Wow.
what I was just thinking. It could change the way sparring goes because, guys can go all out without worrying. Just want to make sure I'm getting this right. Does this protect the whole body from injury, or is it mainly focusing on keeping you from getting concussions and traumatic brain injuries?
Yeah, it's predominantly to protect the brain. If you'll recall, your bones, if you were to fracture a bone, they tend to heal to 110%. But your brain does not tend to heal over time.
Mm.
So that's what's been the major, devastation throughout the time in the military and our sporting events. This retains a small amount, about an Easter egg full of extra blood into the cranial space. And it works just like an airbag in your car, or it works like bubble wrap, and your tissues all accelerate and decelerate at the same rate, so they don't rip and tear and create something called cavitation. And obviously, to our enjoyment, with the FDA giving us the right to say that we block 70 to 80% of all brain injury.
That's amazing.
This is really a game. Like, it's not even a changer. You're really saving the notion of what sports really is, I think.
I sure hope so. I was a competitive swimmer. I was an All-American swimmer. It gave me an unbelievable amount of drive. I did play football. I was terrible at it. But, at the end of the day, I believe in what these sports can do for our kids and helping them
Yes.
learn to be good and productive adults.
Yeah.
I just want it to be safer for everybody.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
now it is.
I think
I think so. I believe so. This is, I mean, just to be on the same podcast with you is amazing, because you are really what is probably turning out to be a visionary creator of this. Now I feel like it, of how not to get a concussion.
But to me, what you're doing goes even further than, again, I'm a huge sports fan. I want especially high school, junior high kids, college kids to be safe. But to me, what you're doing for the military and for our police officers is what's the above and beyond of this thing. And it's so inspiring to know that they're going to be even more protected when they're protecting us.
Well, I'm going to brag a little bit. I had a wonderful exposure in September here in Cincinnati. We had a big production because 3-star General Laura Potters had come to town. She's number 2 in the chain of command of the Army, and she was being honored. And I was, believe it or not, asked to be one of 7 presenters of our technology, because the
Whoa.
title of the presentation is "What has Cincinnati done for our warfighter?" And it turns out in that same week, we just launched the tactical Q collar, which has a sleeve around it, which is actually fire retardant. So with partnering with the military, they wanted to make sure that on a battlefield, or in other cases, like on a fire scenario with firefighters, et cetera, that this device could not burn in any way, shape, or form. So I got to hand her, and step off the podium, I handed her 2 tactical Q collars. Man, was that fun.
See, that was
just
going to
one of
be
the coolest
my
things.
next question. My pastor is a retired firefighter. He was there on 9/11. So will this also help our firefighters when they're going into places?
Absolutely, but they would not have been allowed to take that out into a fire until these new sleeves are here. So again, this is the yellow one. If you can see this, I know your listeners might not be able to, but this is the base product, and it's more of a black and green. But these sleeves all come with these ability to have a fire retardation so that it does not have the ability to burn. And yeah, those are going to be allowed to be used by all first responders.
That's so awesome. So for our viewers watching on YouTube, can you show us how you would go about putting it on, like a demonstration?
Yeah, sure thing.
Not hitting your head in anything, just how you would go about.
So we've had 80 iterations. We actually won the Industrial Design Society of America's Gold Medal Award in 2017 for coming up with an ingenious way to go about this. This looks so simple. We've got $10 million worth of research and development in creating. It finds its own place on your neck. It stays away from your trachea, which when you swallow moves up and down, so you don't want to be anywhere near that. It can be as many as 2 sizes too small, and it still does everything it's supposed to do. The sleeve is made out of a nylon, which is moisture wicking, and it's as soft as women's undergarments. I know that's what your people want to hear about as well. So it's a very comfortable feeling. Now, it's still something going around your neck, so it's going to feel very foreign to you for the first 3, 5, 7 minutes. But if you run around your house 2 or 3 times, you won't even know it's on. I mean, it's just unbelievable how you just forget it's there.
So is the goal like only 2 teams, or is the ultimate goal mass market, where someone like, who goes to the gym a lot and wants that extra protection while they're on the treadmill, they'll be able to just buy one? Or is it only like, is it only buying in bulk for major things?
No, in fact, you can go directly to the website, which is qcollar.com. They're $199. I didn't really want to shill this so much, but that's compared to the price of helmets and things of that nature.
Exactly.
It actually works, right? You can also go to my website, which is David Smith, MD. And there you can also get a copy of my book, which just is being published. And this is that When Heads Come Together, anywhere books are sold. You can get a digital download on that website, and you can learn all about the background and how this journey, which took 15 years to get to market and nearly $20 million, actually transpired. And that's what the book is about, is these crazy, crazy stories of all the pitfalls that were put in front of us that we just kept surpassing one by one.
Wow, unbelievable. Let's talk about your book. When did you decide to write your book, and how did it come about?
Well, as I said, there are all these funny stories, and I started giving talks and presentations to the military and to universities, and people would just come up and they would go, that's really fun. I mean, I can't believe where this evolved from. why don't you write a book? And I'm like, well, I mean, I write technical journal articles. I'm not so sure I can, write a book that won't put people to sleep. And so I actually got assistance. I have a professional writer that helped out, and Dr. Julian Bales wrote the foreword of the book for me because he was so enamored with what we've been able to accomplish. I think you're going to love this one too. We cannot make this claim from the FDA. We haven't submitted data on this, but we've had over 50 professional athletes that tell us that their reaction speed and spatial awareness is improved with this. I believed that was going to happen, so I patented it for that exact same thought, because when you yawn, you activate part of your attentional network, it's called, and you become more awake and alert when you yawn. Well, there's only one physiological action that occurs when you yawn. There's no gas movement. It just is occlusion of your jugulars. And so that awakening, that alertness, that spatial awareness, that's now being felt by these professional athletes.
Wow.
And man, are they starting to comment about it. It's pretty fun.
That's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
so you have it on right now, and you put it on, where does it hit?
Well, it hits on what are called your sternocleidomastoid muscles. So if you turn your head really far to one side, if you feel the other side that you've turned away from, you will feel a small muscle jut out.
Yeah.
And all we're doing is pushing that muscle into the omohyoid muscles that you have when you yawn. And so when we push against that, it compresses that vein exactly the same way. And within a half a second, you're already protected against brain injury.
Wow.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked in an amazing way. I'm kind of speechless.
Yeah, this is one of those few times when both of us are speechless about
Well,
something.
I'll keep talking then. You're going to love
Yeah.
this. This was on NASCAR. I don't know how much trouble I'm going to get the people that are involved, but one of the major players, and you can probably figure this out on your own, was riding or driving for the Penske group, put the collar on, won the first 5 races with the Q collar.
Wow.
On the 6th race, he rolled his vehicle, got clipped from behind, says he hit his head probably 20 times or more, and walked out, took the Q collar off and said, I will never take this off the rest of my career. Okay,
Wow.
NASCAR saw the Q collar for the first time, and they said, you cannot wear that. You have to prove to us it's not performance enhancing.
What?
And this guy says, well, of course it's performance enhancing. Are you mad? Right? So I don't know where that's at, but they wanted us to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to prove to them that our collar was not performance enhancing. And we knew damn well it was. So we're not going to spend that money. And we're hoping that NASCAR will come back to letting their people use this device to protect their people.
Now, while we're on that, let's talk about the other major sports, like with professional baseball, football. Is there a fear of them saying this might be, well, I mean, when we say performance enhancing, we know there's performance enhancing and performance enhancing. Well, is there a fear that this might get treated like steroids?
Well, we can't come up with any side effect that we know of. So no, I mean, as a medical doctor, knowing all of the things that steroids can do, I'm not all that concerned. I do believe that this should be standard equipment for people that are putting themselves in harm's way.
Agreed.
Rodeo riders, professional rodeo are wearing this device now. We have people that are acrobat flyers, confused, disoriented, G-lock and all. Okay, that's not happening apparently. So they're now wearing the device. As I told you, these downhill skiers are using it on a regular basis. The very first chapter of the book goes into Natasha Richardson, Liam Neeson's wife, that just fell over in a snowbank. She didn't even hit a tree and she died of a traumatic. Okay, we could have blocked all that. And so probably
I skateboarded for years. I would have loved to have had one of these.
And then what about the spatial awareness? You'd have been a better skater. You landed on your board more often than not. I mean, these are the things that I just, you aren't going to believe what nature's been doing for 20 million years. And finally, we get to do it.
Wow.
Wow, and we get to talk to you. That's the amazing. I mean, you know, obviously we talk to all kinds of people and stuff, but and everybody makes a difference with their art and with the things that they do, the creative stuff. But I really feel compelled just to say thank you.
Well, it's very kind.
Really?
I will actually take it to the next level for you. We're not done. So during
Oh,
that same process where we were identifying what animals were doing, we also found that the cavity nesting animals also are G-force tolerant. So if you look at peregrine falcons and owls and all these animals that strafe and pull up at the last minute, they all have this thread about them. They live in a cavity where carbon dioxide levels are massive. I mean, 150 times the normal CO2 level. And we ended up realizing that CO2 raises your intracranial volume also, and it drives breathing for you. So we have a secondary device that we're taking to market soon, and it's a simple mask. It weighs 2 ounces. In the military form is completely collapsible into something the size of an egg, right? And it comes right back. And it doesn't weigh anything like a CPAP machine, but it obliterates sleep apnea. That's 1/5 of the world's
Whoa.
population. 1/5 of the world has sleep disordered breathing. And here's the part that's going to blow you out of the water. We actually predicted that it would reverse brain injury once it has occurred. We have a young
Really?
gentleman here at University of Cincinnati's Trauma Center. He came in very, very brain damaged, in 6 days in the intensive care unit, 30 days after I had given a lecture on how my CO2 rebreathing should block and reverse brain injury. And the head of the Neurotrauma Research Center was monitoring for what are called spreading depolarizations. It's the way the brain dies. And they took off on this poor 28-year-old traumatic brain injury gentleman, and they ended up having to go into the family to tell them that they were going to remove the ventilator for the
Oh my
ventilation there.
goodness.
And this colleague, Jed Harding, said, "Hey, you guys remember Dr. Smith's lecture? What would it hurt to bring his CO2 up to head ramming sheep level? Because head ramming sheep have a partial pressure of CO2 of 47, and you and I are 35.
God.
So they did this, and in 4 hours, his spreading depolarizations disappeared. And the next morning, he woke up.
Wow.
What?
We got a $4.2 million Department of Defense grant
Wow.
for our work. We just started that study last week, guys. This is
Wow.
just
This
the
is
beginning.
life in hand. This is game changing. My God.
Full stop. I can't tell you how much fun I have in life. I'm telling you.
Wow.
And I'm gonna, not knowing that you had visual capabilities, I have little concussion chambers here. And if you can see them, there's water on the bottom, there's corn oil on the top. And if I bring it real close, you can see one's partially filled and the other one's fully filled, right? I'm just going to smack that into the back of my hand and let you see what happened to the chamber that's partially filled. See how devastated that is? And the one that
Yeah.
here is partially filled is goo. There's just almost emulsified. But the one that was fully filled is completely unharmed. The energy of that hand impact alone devastated this chamber,
Yeah.
and nothing happens to the other one
Yeah.
whatsoever. The physics is so simple. It's beautiful, the physics and the way it works. And the collar is just damn near elegant. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's just elegant. We can't come up with any negatives, and it has unbelievable positives.
Wow.
I shut him up again. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
it's just amazing. And also, when looking at it, it's so sleek and kind of cool. It's cool looking, also. I mean, I really feel that when the NFL teams start to snatch onto this and put their logos,
Well,
you're
they've
going
got
to see people wearing it all the time.
40 of them are wearing it the very first season.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
I just can't tell you. It's like a dad watching his kid go to the Super Bowl. It was
Yeah.
just an intense feeling. I'm so happy.
Now, is
I
the goal to get licensing on them, like a Yankee logo on it and things like that? Or is it always going to be your branding on it?
I got to be honest with you. I'm just the science guy. I
Oh,
license
okay,
to the
okay.
Q30 people. They will be making those contractual agreements or not
I feel
making
like
them.
I'm on Shark Tank a little
Yeah.
bit asking
I
questions like
know.
that.
I know, I know. Well, the second device, it is something that we've retained within our company, but this one, we just needed help. I did not have $19 million stuck to the bottom of my shoe.
Right, right.
I needed help in fundraising and finding those dollars and getting that research done.
I do know that really life is about perseverance, and it's the things that we think we want to do, and then that's what separates, I think, innovation is the perseverance to try and try again and try again and try again.
I think you're spot on. The book will also talk about the scenario where I realized that I had to start injuring human tissue. Or how am I going to prove that I can prevent that? So I had this harebrained, crazy idea. I actually started filling cartridges with my own blood and going up to the 7th floor top of my hospital and throwing them down into the parking lot, and then rushing that cartridge into the lab to see if I injured the blood. Did I cause it to explode or damage in any way? I could not create enough force by doing that,
Wow.
throwing it from the top of that hospital. I got very discouraged, started going back to the literature. What can I do? And I finally found this guy, Dr. DeWitt, down in Texas, that was actually using a nail gun and imparting a black powder charge into cartridges to mimic the forces that a IED creates on our soldiers' brains. So I took CO2 cartridges and I filled them with my own blood, and then ultimately got 40 other volunteers, and we filled those cartridges with blood partially and fully, just like you saw in my little concussion chambers here. And when I filled the cartridge rather than partially filled it, no damage occurred, or partially, almost no damage occurred when we filled the cartridge. That's all we did differently. So I knew we could block IED levels of force. And then I had to try to find people that would allow me to impart those energies into their brains. And guess what? SWAT officers do it every year. They do preachers trials. They blow up stuff so that they get comfortable with doing it. And we just bought them their C4, and they said, sure, you can have a scan before the day and after the day.
Yeah.
Half of us wear collars, no problem. We can do that.
Wow.
And we showed the military that we blocked IED levels from entering their brains.
I think that's probably like you said, Eric, probably one of the most important things, because you hear about just the devastation and the destruction from the IEDs. And I think, oh man, Dave, you were absolutely amazing. And your perseverance, look at where it's gotten you, but more importantly, look at what you're doing for mankind. That's the whole deal. Do you think about that sometimes?
Well, I'm going to go one step further, just to blow you off your chairs, right? Because I know what you two do and love, and how you are what you are. So my lead design engineer actually was the sound engineer for a heavy metal band in Columbus, Ohio. And she read my white paper on the fact that we should block these forces from entering the inner ear in the same manner, and that I theoretically predicted it wouldn't change your tonal inflections and what you're hearing, et cetera. And so she said, can I take a prototype in? Because I sit there next to those speakers all night long. And from midnight when we leave all the way to 6 o'clock the next day, I have ringing in my ears. We call it an acoustic hangover. Apparently, rock bands do and deal with this, and they're all having deafness as their days and years go on. So she put the Q collar in, and she ran to me the next day going, oh my God, Dr. Dave, I don't have any hangover anymore. I use this when I shoot. So I go out on shooting ranges, and even with earplugs and muffs on, I still get ringing in my ears. You put a Q collar on, I've got no ringing in my ears. So your industry, because we were talking about some of the wonderful bands before we went live.
Yeah.
Most of those people have deafness when they get older.
Oh
We-
yeah, the
we can block all-
majority.
You have got to contact AC/DC Brian Johnson because he has really bad ringing, and I think he even has starting like to go deaf. But you got to contact AC/DC right now.
I'm telling you, I don't know that I can repair, maybe our other technologies that we were talking about earlier might
Yeah.
repair the damage, but this will block any further damage.
Yes.
And you ready for this? The number one cost to the Veterans Administration, your military, number one cost is hearing aids.
Oh, wow.
I would. Yeah,
Wow, not
definitely, yeah.
anymore.
Not anymore.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
Fun stuff, huh?
Oh, man. It's fun and it's
Well,
wonderful
it-
and beautiful.
Think of the responsibility that the two of you have now to get the word out for me.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Pressure on you two is just intense. And your audience, of course.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. This
Wow.
is wow.
So early on, I was going through JIDO and I was actually under a confidentiality. I was not allowed to tell anybody. Do you know how hard that was? When I
Oh,
met my
yeah.
wife, I actually had to have her sign a confidentiality document.
Whoa.
And the
Really?
reason is if you release it publicly, the patent office won't let you patent it.
Right. Oh, man.
It's not that I didn't trust her. It's just that if something leaked, I had to be able to prove to the patent office that we
It
never
wasn't.
publicly
Yeah. Yeah.
disclosed it. Right?
So you would go to work. She goes, "Where are you going?" Go, "I'm going to work. I'll see you later." Click. Wow.
Well, we were dating at the time. I
Oh,
think it's
okay.
the only reason she married me is because it was so mysterious. You know what I
You could
She
have been
thought you
a
were the
CIA
FBI or
operative for
CIA.
all she knew.
mean? Yeah, I know. I recommend it to everybody. You got to pull that stuff sometimes, you know. Give you an upper hand.
Oh, man. I tell you, it's really, I think will last for a couple of days because the heaviness of all of what you've accomplished. And obviously it's been 15 years, but in those 15 years, the things that you have found and that are going to profoundly make a difference and already
Yeah,
is making a difference. It's mind-blowing. I'm in awe. I can't what
Because I
yeah.
think the whole thing is, the things that we enjoy, obviously filmmaking is mine and Larry's first love. But when we talk about our military, like we
That's
always end our show with support our troops. This is literally supporting our
Support, yeah.
troops. And we're also both big sports fans. And you ultimately have to understand that, yeah, sports is still human bodies going out there. Like I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I'm gonna call him the kid from the Bulls. I'm 41 years old. Everybody's a kid to me now. But the injury he got, that's a young man with the rest of his life ahead of him. And we watch them put their bodies on the line every single week. Like again, I talk about wrestling a lot. Those guys put on all those shows, get into their car that they gotta pay for, by the way, and
Right.
drive after just getting hit in the head multiple times. They don't get to take a few months off like MMA fighters do to nurse their injuries. They're back in there. And now knowing that there's a way to keep them safe, forget about us watching, so that they could prolong their life. There's so many countless athletes who, were known for throwing a ball around, but now can't do it with their kids or grandkids. And that's a shame.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, it did not get lost on me that you're filmmakers. I truly would love to talk to somebody in your industry about a book to documentary of some sort. I don't know how connected you are, but I'm telling you, we have so many visuals. We have so many stories that's popped up. I mean, this is one book. We probably could have done 3. on all of the great wild stories. I mean, back to the concussion movie for 1 second, all of the visual aids in there that help the people, the audience to see what they were talking about with brain injury, those are all mine. They
Wow.
actually got a release from me because they have woodpeckers on the desks of Alec Baldwin playing Julian Bell. That was my woodpecker.
Wow.
Wow.
So it is very amenable to the visual arts, I think.
Yeah.
And would hope that maybe somebody in your audience would find that interesting and
Well,
intriguing.
this is something that a 30 by 30, but the, ESPN could easily do something like this, or some sort of documentary. There is a story in this, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Quick question. Who would play you in the movie?
Well, you already said him, Brad Pitt, right?
Nice. Yes.
Oh, you're looking at my bald head. Oh,
No, because that's the thing is
Heisenberg.
he no, let's go with Brad Pitt. He'll shave his head. He'll go, I'll do it. He'll do it.
Well,
Yeah.
I had a full head of hair before I had to start working with the FDA. So
I can
it really
imagine.
couldn't hair, no
That's
hair.
probably a book in and of itself dealing with those
Right.
guys, huh?
Right. Yeah.
It was challenging to say the least.
Yeah. And obviously that's also in the book, right?
Oh yeah, it's all in there. It really is. Hopefully, people will find it enjoyable just to kind of see the trials and tribulations. But also, we found 2 physiological mechanisms that mankind never knew existed,
Wow.
and so we had to go through both of them. So, I had to make the decision: do I separate this for a whole completely separate book? But I just couldn't help it. I mean, I just started writing and it just kept blathering on. So there's a lot of topics in there. And like I said, people, altitude sickness, I get severe altitude sickness, not with my device on. It goes away instantly. It's just mind blowing. And these are things that we've struggled with for decades and instantly gone, so these are the kind of things that we just think it's a whole new day. And we've got a whole new way of hopefully making, the human condition a little bit more tolerable, because sometimes it can be rough.
Man, it just, I mean, there was the world like with concussions, and now is it easy to say that we're looking at a new world without concussions?
We're not going to block them all. You put a Q collar on and jump off of the Empire State Building, we're not going to be able to help you.
Some people would do that.
But it dramatically makes things more safe. I mean, to levels and degrees that were just never conceived. And I'll tell you what, people think that I'm a quack because our data is so dramatic. But I want to say this: it wasn't my data. This was Harvard's data. This was Cincinnati Children's data. I was an author, but I never touched any of the subjects. I just helped everybody understand how, in God's name, we knew this was going to happen. And we had to convince them academically that it was real. And that's what happens when you get 25 publications.
Wow. I'm in awe. I'll probably be in awe of you. I can't believe that you would be on our podcast.
Okay, now you need to wait a minute. Let me go get my wife in the other room because she needs to hear that. I keep trying to tell her that she should be in awe, but she's not in awe.
That's right. She goes, "Are you still not going to tell me what you do?" Never mind.
I know. She didn't play any sports in high school and college, and she just, why would I care about this collar? I mean, what now? It's just so funny. She just keeps me so grounded.
I love it. And you really are, Dave. You've got such a good outlook, a good personality, and you really are a blessing to the sports world and people who
to our military and our first responders more so.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. We've got to get the word out. I mean, I know it's only been a year, but
Yeah.
we've got a lot to do here, and we've got a lot of brains to save, and every day is another scenario that we could have solved people's issues. I don't know if you saw
Man.
Tua from Miami come up
Yeah.
to at Cincinnati. That was just devastating to watch him have that brain injury.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't have to happen.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah. Man, I tell you, we will help you do whatever we can.
yeah, we'll talk behind off mic, as we call it
Yeah.
too, about
Yeah.
stuff. Definitely.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the one thing that stuns me that hasn't been picked up yet really is baseball and batting. You should have more spatial awareness. You should be able to
Yeah.
hit that ball better. And oh, by the way, the helmet doesn't protect your brain, right? So the cue collar will protect your brain, and you're going to have a better batting average. I mean,
Yeah.
what?
Well, you see, knowing baseball, that's the first thing they're going to come down against, that it's going to help your batting average.
Well, and again, we can't deny the fact that just having more confidence is going to make it a performance enhancer.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you have a homework assignment. You need to go down and take a look at Tulane University's quarterback last year. So Tulane got ranked, I think, either 9th or 16th, and they've never been ranked before. And when you look at the quarterback, I think his name was Pritz or something. I'm skipping on his name. I'm sorry. But his scores as a quarterback doubled just by putting the cue collar on.
Wow.
So I'm not trying to take away from his unbelievable talent. Please don't get me wrong. But
Yeah,
the
we
only
know what you mean.
difference
Yeah.
between 2021 and 2022 is the cue collar. And to see him in the pocket, I mean, he's fearless in there, and he just drills it. And they're doing so wonderfully. And that, I have to say, we may have had some small part in helping him do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't doubt that. I don't. That's amazing.
My
You-
wife and I wear this every single time we bike. We bike on a regular basis,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I've been wanting to do. I mean, we're thinking of the big things, but I'm glad you mentioned that, because like I
Mhm.
said, this is good for me when I go to the gym and I'm on the treadmill, or if I'm just walking my dog around. It sounds like it'll help with any activity that you're doing, and not just protecting you, but like you said, the spatial awareness and
Right.
things like that.
Yeah. I get on an airplane and they say, okay, you have to put your seats in the seat back in the upright position and whatever. And I'm sitting there pushing on my jugulars, right?
Right.
I don't really care where the seat is. I'm going to push on my jugulars. Thank you. And people think I'm crazy, and I could pull the cue collar out and do the same thing. But in reality, I don't always have it with me, and I probably should.
Yeah. Yeah. And people can pick it up at, what was the website again?
So you can go to cuecollar.com. You have to fit yourself. So you have to watch the videos that are there. There's a link from my website, which is davidsmithmd.com as well. And you can grab the collar that way.
Very
And
cool.
links will be in the description if you're listening in on Anchor.
Yes. Yes.
And when the show goes up, we will definitely tag Dr. Dave in all of our social medias to point you to the product.
And
Yeah.
you're, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and please don't forget that the book is anywhere books are sold.
Yes,
You
and the
can
book also.
You can get a download for $9.99. It's digital on
bad.
the website. I mean, it's very inexpensive. I hope people would consider it that way. And I think it's a fun read. I mean, I know I'm biased, but the feedback I've been getting has been great.
That's very cool.
Awesome.
And if it's anything like what we've been talking about, it's a pretty amazing read. So yeah.
Well,
I just want to say, before you wrap up, Eric, Dr. Dave, thank you for so many things, but thank you for taking the time to be on our show and talking about your book and caring enough to be driven to find answers. So thank you.
Well, thank you back. You guys do an enormous amount of good for society, bringing these kinds of things to light.
Thank you.
And don't pat yourself on the back some too. You guys are incredible at what you do, and I love being
Thank
around
you so
passionate
much.
people.
Thank you. Hang on, honey. Did you
Yeah.
hear that?
I'll tell my imaginary wife that also.
There you go.
But no,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Dave, thank you so, so much for coming on. And again, like you said, all of the links where you can buy the product and the book will be in the description. And guys listening to us, if me and Larry could Dr. Dave can make it so simple that me and Larry could understand it, all of our listeners who are much smarter than us could really get the feel for this. Yeah, if you're a parent and your child is doing sports, contact us. We'll contact Dr. Dave so he could contact the school and so they can contact the school and help get this into as many young people as possible.
Yes.
Dr. Dave, thank you so much. And wow, our call off has never been more fitting than tonight, folks. Everybody, remember, support our troops.